I would like to acknowledge the Kamilaroi people who are the traditional custodians of this land. I would also like to pay respect to Elders past, present and emerging, and extend that respect to other Aboriginal people present here tonight. And now I will ask Pastor James Ardill to come to the lectern to give the prayer. Thank you, Mark. If everyone can stand.
Almighty Father, we appreciate the God-given nature of our Australian democracy and the peaceful and respectful civil governance at all levels of government. We proclaim that integrity, equity and fairness will be the hallmark of Tamworth Regional Council. We pray that the councillors and staff be wise and considered in their duties and deliberations, and that every decision will bring greater prosperity and a deeper sense of community to Tamworth and to our region. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thanks, Pastor. Thank you. Apologies and leave of absence. We have 3 apologies tonight. The Mayor, Councillor Russell Webb, who is absent due to sick leave and unfortunately he's got COVID, or recovering from COVID. Councillor Mark Sutherland, who is out of the area for work commitments, and Councillor Brooke Southwell, who is absent due to personal reasons. We'll proceed now to community consultation, and we have one member of the community wishing to speak, Mr David McKinnon, who would like to speak in relation to item 9.1. If you could come to the lectern. Also advise if you've made any donations to any councillors, and you have 3 minutes to speak.
Certainly no donations to any councillor. It's 9.1 that I'm talking on tonight, and I just think it's something that has to be considered. I'm aware that the powers to be will probably make me powerless in this conversation, but it's still a point that I'm going to raise. We're talking about a professional body, IPART, making a determination for this town, and that determination is that it's 0.7 for reasons that they know and understand and are professional about. To turn around then and say, I think we deserve 3 times what they claim because we're amateurs and we don't like their modelling. I think that's just a bit rich. And the claim, of course, also is that if we don't get the rate rise, we'll cut services. Well, you're already cutting services. You've cut bulk goods. You're talking now about the red bins. Other charges are all going up. Water's going up. And certainly the tip fees are going up, which I'm well aware of. And so the idea that there's going to be consequences, there's already consequences without it. And I just think that it has to be considered that we live in a time where we have, in this town, a significant number of people who are on fixed income. And you may not be aware, but we actually have the lowest socio-economic index in this town compared to our other sister Evo cities, and I think that has to be taken on board. We're looking at things like petrol going up, we're looking at interest rates going up, we're looking at all these things going up. Food obviously, and rent of course is rising, and many of those people on fixed income are in rent, and everything associated is going up, and the idea that the council can just do 3-fold what has been recommended by professionals just seems rich to me. And I'd particularly like to know why an 8 million election gift is not, with no strings tied, is not something that is enough, that you actually have to turn around and put it up 3 times what the recommended rate is. It just seems incredible. And I'd also like to know exactly what the council's doing on their part to cut their cloth. I mean, I see their car parks full of big 4-wheel drives that are thirsty as hell, going through an enormous amount of fuel today, and the price of fuel, I'm sure there's fuel cards that go with those cars. I just think, what are you doing, council, to actually cut your cloth rather than just slapping the whole problem onto ratepayers who are all mostly on fixed income and struggling as it is. And you have to realise that when you stress the economy of this town, and you stress it in that way, you've got a smouldering adult group which will vote at some point, and I think you only got to see what's happening in France today, where you've got the far right literally competing with the comfortable bourgeois.
Mr McKinnon, could you bring your presentation to an end?
And I think you have to realise that as soon as you have this sort of pressure put on adults, the children are aware of that pressure, and we have a crime rate in this town, and it's to do with decisions partly made in this room, and the answer for most people is just get more police. Well, I disagree. I think the council has to cut their cloth.
Thank you very much. Moving on to item 3, minutes of a previous meeting submitted for approval. Do I have a mover? Councillor Betts, seconder. Councillor Mears. Would you like to speak to your motion?
No, thanks, Mr. Acting Mayor.
Any opposition? All those in favour? Carried. Disclosures of item 4, disclosures of interest. Any disclosures of interest tonight? No disclosures. I'll move on to item 5. There is no mayoral minute. Item 6, there is no notice of motion. There is no environment and planning report, so I'll move on to item 8.1. Do I have a mover? Councillor Betts, seconder. Councillor Coates, would you like to speak for your motion?
Yes, I would, Mr. Acting Mayor. Yeah, this is fantastic to be able to change the process of the way we do the curbing and guttering program, because it allows for a far more strategic approach, where at the current regime, if we want to do an area and individuals want to actually do the curb and guttering and the next person doesn't, it causes a whole heap of conflicts, and it's not a good strategic plan. And I noticed that we've got 634 kilometres of curbing and guttering for a council this size, which is quite a significant area, or linear area. But what it does is it allows, with all the stormwater access and problems that we've got, it now allows us to have a far more strategic approach to be able to manage the stormwater with the curbing and guttering in areas that really need it, rather than just in areas that people want. So I certainly support the recommendation. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Betts. Any opposition? Any other further speakers? I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Item 8.2. Do I have a mover? Councillor Betts, seconder. Councillor Tickle, would you like to speak for your motion?
No, thanks, Mr. Acting Mayor.
Any opposition? I'll put the motion. Any other further discussion?
Just if I may, Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to thank the Roads and Local Traffic Committee for putting this together, and also our staff. Obviously with the close of Anzac Day, it's probably similar every year, but a lot of things have to be taken into consideration, and the work they've done to put this together, I think, is terrific. And just like to thank them on my behalf for the work that they've done.
Thank you, Councillor Mears. Any further discussion? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Item 9.1. Do I have a mover? Councillor Burke. A seconder? Councillor Betts, thank you. Would you like to speak for the motion?
I do, thanks, Acting Mayor, and I'm sure my fellow councillors will also be wanting to speak on this particular issue. With regards to the special permanent variation in rates from the IPART recommended 0.7 increase to 2% on a permanent basis, it will avoid the loss in revenue of $514,000 odd in year one. In year two, of course, we double that if we don't get address this particular shortfall that we have now. So it will have an ongoing cumulative impact on our capacity as a council to be able to raise the revenues that we need to pay the staff, and it's my understanding that staff is our biggest cost in this organisation. The staff act under a Local Government New South Wales award, and that's a 3-year award of 2.5% increase each year, plus any additional performance increases that apply in their performance reviews. So that's a massive cost that we would have to either address by not being able to afford as many staff, or cut some services in a way in which I think the ratepayers would certainly not be wanting to hear or feel. CPI rose at 1.3% in the December quarter, annualised at 3.5%. So we're not even keeping up with inflation by proposing a 2% increase. It was very interesting when we were doing the campaigning to represent and be elected on this council. I didn't hear one constituent who came to me and said, I want a smaller council and I want less done for less money, and I want my rates to go down to do that. I didn't have not one person say that to me. I'm assuming, and I doubt if my fellow councillors also had anyone say that to them. Our annual operating plan allows for a 2% increase in spending year on year, revenue raising year on year, and so our plans were already in place before the IPART decision, which was quite an unusual way in which they've gone about assessing the 0.7, and I think that we would have to, when we do our expenditure reviews, be looking at some serious cuts that I think would be very unpalatable to our ratepayers. Of the councillors here, most of us went down to the LG New South Wales conference. It was the biggest single issue at the LG New South Wales conference, and clearly the government has heard that and has responded. And I seem to remember in our prayer tonight that we talked about being fair and equitable. I think this is fair and equitable, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Councillor Burke. Any other speakers? Speaker against first. Any other speakers like to comment? Councillor Coates.
Through you, Mr Acting Mayor. Unfortunately, with this debacle, we're actually seeing IPART raise its head again. And we've seen in the past that they actually have failed with the water. And what we really don't want to do is go down that track again. I think in particular they've failed regional New South Wales with the manner in which they've decided that they would peg increases, in that we see Tamworth Council, who has got quite a large area to address and to maintain, being given 0.7%, and yet some of the metropolitan areas, which are far smaller and much easier to raise money, being given 5%. So I think that in itself actually is a reflection on just how out of touch that IPART is with regional New South Wales. And as my fellow councillor Burke said, that as outlined, TRC planned and documented in its 2021-22 integrated planning and report framework an increase in rates of 2%, which was only obviously was higher than what IPART are allowing us at 0.7. And in addition to that, there have been increase in costs to councils, such as construction materials, fuels, insurances, and there's been a decreased return on investments. So I think I acknowledge that the 2% may not be palatable to everyone. However, to continue to provide the infrastructure and services to the community, I can see no alternative. And having considered the options and their impact for council and its ratepayers, and I am a ratepayer as well as most of us here, I support the proposal that for a permanent single-year special variation, so we can actually minimise the cumulative impact over the next 5 to 8 years on council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coates. Was there Councillor Tickle?
Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. As a council and a community, we must keep our council's budget on a firm footing so we can ensure there is minimal interruption to council's delivery programs which support the livability and growth of our community. We have people moving here to this region and to our community because they want to enjoy our lifestyle and the services that we provide. Only today there's a headline that people, more and more people are coming because of the flood situation, but during COVID we saw a lot of city dwellers moving to the country. They want to come here, they like the livability and the affordability of being here. IPART, as has been mentioned, has failed us with water pricing and unfortunately has failed us again with this. It's a city-centric body It's based its 0.7% on population, which leaves us high and dry in the country. We have 3,000 kilometres of road to maintain, 2,000 of which are unsealed. In these densely populated areas of many LGAs, particularly in the metropolitan areas, they have very little roadwork to maintain, and in fact a lot of it they don't have to. They don't have 6 libraries, they don't have 6 swimming pools, they don't have an airport, they don't have water and waste infrastructure to look after, and I could go on and on. Those factors obviously have not been taken into consideration when they've come up with a 0.7% increase. Usually we have 2 to 3% rate pegging, so it's most unusual that that figure hasn't been set this time around. Council, like any other business in town, and also like individuals, as was pointed out in community consultation, we all face higher costs, higher fuel particularly, higher building costs, higher everything. But if we want to continue to operate as a council and operate effectively, we need to support and lobby to have this rate, this increase of 2%. We have already made cuts. During COVID, we may have faced a massive loss in income, massive, particularly in the airport and events and many other areas. We have made a lot of budget constraints, and we financially were operating very well, but we must support this 2% rate pegging this time around, and based on most rates, it will be very little per week. I know very little is a lot to some people, but I'll just point out again, we have people moving here because they want to live in the country, they want to live in our region.
Councillor Tickle, any other comments? Councillor Mears?
I'd just like to reinforce what my fellow councillors have said in regards to IPART, although the difficulty being is that you can't pick and choose what they get right and what they get wrong. They've got order wrong, they've got TAFE wrong, and now we choose to say that they've got the 0.7 wrong. Now, as our community members mentioned earlier, they're supposed to be the professionals, and I was a little offended that we're not professional, because we're certainly taking this very, very seriously. And we're very aware of the cost cuttings that have been going on over the years, including not keeping up with inflation that is drastically affecting council's ability to provide services and operate. Unfortunately, at times, and we do have that luxury of asking for an exemption, but I've always been told, and not that I agree with it all the time, but I've always been told you go by the umpire's decision. So I can understand why many of the ratepayers may be aggrieved at this decision of council, but unfortunately I think given the financial status at the moment and how we need to move forward, I don't think we have much of an option other than to go after government for more money in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Mears. Any further? Councillor Betts?
Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. That is one of the benefits of speaking last, and there's no other councillors up in the move of the motion that can speak. Everyone has said exactly what I was going to say, and I totally support what all the other councillors said. This is not, council is not tonight approving the 2% rate rise. What we're doing is asking for that variation to be determined by a process. But what we're saying is that the cumulative effect of not getting the 2%, which is still less, as Councillor Burke said, less than the inflation, is going to significantly affect the compounding effect of this council's ability to be able to maintain its services that people expect, also maintaining the staff levels to deliver those services. So it's absolutely imperative that we show leadership as a council, that's what we're elected for, to show leadership for the long term. I know it's a bit of a blow, or a big blow for some people, and it is essential that we do it for the future of the growth and the maintaining of the livability of this council. Thanks, Mr Acting Mayor.
Thanks, Councillor Betts. No further comment. Councillor Burke, did you want to close debate?
Thank you, Acting Mayor. It's just a really solid base for the council moving forward when all of the councillors agree that we proceed forward in this direction, and and put the council on a financially very stable footing. The good thing is that we've all been made acutely aware of the cumulative impact of this. We're all aware of the other costs, as my fellow councillors have said, but this is something that going forward for this council will allow it to be able to deliver the services that it so desperately wants to do and wants to keep our community a vibrant and healthy one. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Burke. No further discussion. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? It's carried. Item 10, community services. There are no community services.
9.2, Mr Mayor.
Oh, sorry. 9.2. Item 9.2. Do I have a mover? Councillor Coates, seconder. Councillor Tickle, would you like to speak for your motion?
Just very briefly, thank you, Mr Mayor. I'm one of those very boring people who actually went through every single one of these charges today and had a look at them, because I felt I couldn't comment on it unless I actually knew what I was talking about. And I have to say that most of the charges have only gone up by 10%, in fact some of them less than 5%. And the ones that have increased significantly are those that seem to be based around inspections of buildings and other works that are going on, planning proposals, etc. But I do note that some of them have actually gone down as well, so I was quite pleased to be understanding of where those charges were being laid against them.
Thank you, Councillor Coates. Any speaker against?
No against, but I'll make a statement.
Councillor Mears.
Acting Mayor. I'm acutely aware of the necessity for these increases to allow council to provide services to the community. Not to increase fees and charges may result in the inability of council to provide future infrastructure and service provisions to our electorate. I hold concerns that these increases may have, I hold concerns on the impact that these increases may have on our residents, especially on those from the lower end of the socio-economic scale, and for businesses given the current financial impulse of COVID and other rising costs for doing business. Unfortunately, to what appears to be a never-ending program of cost shifting from the state government back to councils, we are left with the unenviable decision to raise fees, charges and rates. It is, in my opinion, the state government, government's continued policy of shifting taxing responsibilities to local council. Whilst they continue to divest themselves from that responsibility, they continue to push increases to residents and businesses via underfunding of councils. Cost shifting from previous governments has led to councils being in a position where they cannot afford to attend to their local roads, whilst also maintaining regional roads previously transferred without funding support. Waste levies, emergency service levies, underfunding of public libraries, pensioner rebates and many other services and supports has seen councils over the last 10 years from the period 2005 to 2016 have $6.2 billion removed from councils' coffers. This is certainly not abating and in fact appears to be continuing in an upward path. I'm reticent to keep increasing rates, fees and charges whilst the state government continues to impose financial restrictions upon council in the hope that they will continue to increase the charges to our residents. I will support this recommendation to the proposed fees charges, proposed 22-23 fees and charges in order to progress this to public consultation and debate. I will closely monitor the opinions of our residents and their thoughts on the additional impost on their collective pockets. The residents' opinions will guide my future decisions on this matter.
Thank you, Councillor Mears. Any other comments? Item 9.2.
Oh, in favour.
So, Councillor Tickle.
Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. Fellow Councillor Coates, I too read through the fees and charges and came to the same conclusions. While some have increased, some have gone down. I think the largest increase may have been 20%, and that seems a lot. However, I personally feel it's well warranted, and that's the airport parking fee, like for all-day parking. You can leave your car at the airport for $12. Well, there wouldn't be another airport in Australia with the services that we offer at our airport that you could do that. And if you'd like to walk a little further, it's $10 instead of $8. So, and then other fees have come down, and others, a small percentage have increased. So overall, I think it's, there's a lot of work gone into this document. It is a draft document, and we do need input from the public, and we'll be assessing all that input when it comes forth. So well done on everyone involved in formulating all those documents, and I certainly will be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Tickle. Is there any further comment? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Now, item 10, Community Services. There is none, so I'll move on to item 11, reports to be considered in closed council. But before we make a motion to enter closed council, there's no members of the public that might like to hear some matter of closed council and open council. Was there any application?
No, Mr Mayor.
No. Well, if I could have a mover to move into closed council. Councillor Tickle, second Councillor Mears. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. I'll ask the,
Wait till we open the doors and go back online.
and now I'll ask the acting GM, to provide us a report of matters considered in closed council.
Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor. Tonight we had a report in the closed section of the ordinary council meeting for the 12th of April 2022, and in this report you considered 3 items, items 12.1 through to 12.3, and for each of those items you adopted the recommendation as it was written. Thank you, Mr Acting Mayor.
Thank you. Could I have a motion to accept? Councillor Mears, seconder. Councillor Burke, all those in favour? Against? Carried. Well, therefore, I'll bring the meeting to a close at 7:01.